I told my friends what I'm about to tell you, and they urged me to share it here. It happened back in December, about a week before Christmas. I'm a 32-year-old guy currently using my GI Bill to go to college in a city in one of the mountain time zone states. I'm so busy with school and work, so I don't have time to go out and socialize often, so I have to rely a lot on the apps to go on dates. I matched with this really cute girl around my age. We had a good convo, and then we scheduled a date. It was at a bar restaurant not far for either of us to drive, so it was easy. She was very pretty in person, and we got along great. During our conversation, I found out that she worked in a non-cop role at the police station, like a receptionist essentially. I also learned she had a roommate whom she said was out of town for the holidays. She added that she hated being alone because she had a crazy ex-boyfriend who stalked her. I was a little uneasy at that and told her as much, and she said he's harmless, so I kind of let it go. We had a few more drinks and were there about another hour, and at her suggestion, she said we should go back to her place. And I mean, I wasn't going to argue it, she was hot. She then insisted on driving. I told her I was fine, and she said no, that I had been drinking, and she saw too many DUIs at her job. I got what she was saying, but I only had 2 gin and tonics and was fine, and again she insisted. I thought it was weird, but I didn't care. We went to her house and she walked up and just opened the door. She didn't unlock it, it was already open, which I found very odd because she said she had a stalker and that her roommate was gone. She started feeding her cat, and as she was doing that, I saw a bowl of cereal on the kitchen counter. I touched it and it was still cold, like it hadn't been there for a while. The cereal wasn't soggy either. I asked her whose it was, and she hesitated and said she ate it as a snack before heading to the bar. It just didn't make sense, and before you could say anything, she just kissed me and out her arms around me seductively and said for me to take her to her room. Again, she was pretty hot, and I quit caring about the cereal. Lol. We started fooling around, and I went to close the curtains, and she told me to leave them open. A few minutes later, maybe 5, we were in bed and my back was to the window, and she let out a huge gasp. A scared gasp. Her eyes were at the window. I turned around and saw someone in a hoodie, and they took off. I heard the steps running on her back deck. I immediately jumped up and ran out to make sure her doors were locked, and of course the front door wasn't. I ran to it and locked it, and right when I did, the door started banging. I went to open it because I was gonna fuck the dude up, or try to, and she told me to just go back to bed with her. I screamed at her and asked if she was insane, and she told me he does this and goes away. And I asked her, you know, this is your ex? And she said yay, and to not worry about it. At this point, he started banging on the side of the house on the other end, and she didn't seem at all scared and kept trying to get me to go back to her bed. I didn't want to call the cops because for all I know this dude is a cop, or she'd know the cops that showed up and would take her side. I also couldn't just leave because my car was at the bar and I was terrified. At this point I started calling her out for the door not being locked, the cereal. I openly called her a liar. She couldn't come up with any logical answers and I had no idea what I was into. I shouldn't have done this, but my fight or flight was pretty much kicked in, and I told her, if this is a robbery or some kind of setup, I promise I will kill you both. I'm not a hard ass or anything, but my fear told me to let her know that no matter what it was, they'd have a fight on their hands. My thoughts of what were going to happen to me were all over the place. I ordered an Uber off my phone and didn't tell her. I just kept arguing with her and asking what was going on, hoping to just keep her talking and in the room. I stayed right next to the door so I could leave ASAP. Luckily, I never got my pants off, and my jacket and shoes were right by the door, so I was able to get dressed. The Uber showed up, and without saying anything, I just opened her door and ran out as fast as I could. I looked back at the door, and she was just standing there. It's only been a little over a month, but I honestly have no idea what the fuck I was into. I don't believe the story of just a girl with a crazy ex based off of the factors I told you. It feels like either a robbery or some weird fetishized cuck type thing. I don't know. Definitely something I'm very mad at myself for. I mean, I'm a 9-year Navy vet and allowed myself to get into a situation like that. I reported her account on the Uber ride back to the bar, and I told the bartender as well if they ever saw her in there again.
In December of last year, I, F21 at the time, met Nick, M22, on Hinge. Mistake, I know. I thought he was very handsome, and he went to a good school for a D1 sport. Before we first met, he seemed incredibly respectful and asked many questions trying to get to know me. The first time we hooked up was an odd experience. He asked me how I did on the SAT, wouldn't stop complimenting me about my rosy red cheeks, put a used Zyn in my mouth as we were making out, and stole my lighter as an excuse to return and see me again. He also told me that he had lost tens of thousands of dollars gambling in the past. Obviously, my judgment was questionable, but I continued hooking up with him as I found him endearing, and he still seemed like a very sweet boy. He went to school in another city, so I saw him a few times over the next couple of months when he would come back to our hometown. The red flags started to show, and in retrospect, I really should have dipped at that point. The third time we hung out, he asked to take me on a date, but was 2.5 hours late and brought me to a Blaze Pizza, where I watched him house an entire pizza as I twiddled my thumbs. After the date, he confessed to me that he was an alcoholic. I later found out he was a drug addict too, and had become sober after a couple of stints in rehab during his freshman year of college. He told me a story about how he got one of his scars. He was harassing a woman in a gas station parking lot in high school, and her boyfriend hit him, so he beat him up and escaped on his bicycle, but a random passerby pushed him off. He also had a minor fit when he realized I was wearing a coat made for men and had cut my hair shorter than when I had met him. Eventually, we became exclusive and started dating. I know. When I said yes to dating, he was so happy that he cried tears of joy. That night, he confessed to me that he came from a billionaire family. We dated for 6 months after that, and I was exposed to depths of addiction and idiocy, especially around money, that were unimaginable to me. For example, he would book express Amtrak tickets when arriving to the station instead of ahead of time, spending hundreds of dollars each time. He would rack up $1,000 Uber bills on his family's account. His parents paid him $50 an hour to walk the dog, and he worked for a charity his mom had set up, paying him $30 an hour, but he was still somehow always broke. His mom would go back to school shopping for him and spend tens of thousands on his clothing, which he never had occasion to wear because he was functionally unemployed. He was a terrible boyfriend, overly demanding, very shady with other women, and incapable of taking no for an answer. He'd tell me many stories from his addict days, including when he had tried meth that a drug dealer had given him as a free sample, when he'd lost over $20,000 getting scammed at a casino by a con man, or when he got robbed by a hooker and her pimp. I thought he was a changed man, but about 3 months into our relationship, he started gambling again. I'd never seen a real addict in action, and it was mind-boggling. He would spend any time he could at the casino. He would be there all night, 8 p.m. to 8 a.m., or leave his internship early to go during the afternoon. He rapidly started losing lots of money, but no one in his family realized, even though he lived with them. He would imply that he knew how much money was in my bank account and the PIN on my card. And I knew that he owed people a lot of money, so I changed all of my codes. About 2 months later, his father's alcoholism became a major problem, and the father was sent to rehab. My boyfriend then started drinking again. Within 2 weeks, he broke up with me and slept with another woman. I found that out months later when he scrolled through a selfie he'd taken with her in his room the day he broke up with me, and then tried to play it off. By the end of the relapse, he was drunk 24/7 and would call me threatening me and flexing his superior education on me. No one in his family had realized he was drinking again, and I ended up telling his sister what had happened. Within 24 hours, they had sent him back to rehab, the same rehab the father was in, $1,200 per night. Then the rehab center said that only father or son could stay, not both, and the father kicked the son out to a much lower quality place. Eventually, my boyfriend got out of rehab and entered a halfway house, but I told him that I no longer wanted to be with him, so he left the halfway home and immediately came to my house. A few weeks later, I found out about the other woman and also started to question a formal he'd gone to 2 days before we started dating. When I ended things for good, I'd tried many times earlier, but he would always cry and beg, and it was effective. He lost his mind. He threatened to email my nudes to my father and my job, threatened to file a police report if I didn't pay him $1,000 in cash to compensate him for any dates we'd ever gone on. We usually went 50-50. And threatened to have me institutionalized through the Marchman Act, which I later looked up and found out was only for Florida, where we do not live. He was obsessed with the idea of me going to his friend's engagement party with him, and when I blocked him everywhere, including email, he messaged me through Spotify, threatening me if I didn't go with him. He also heavily implied that he'd put a hidden camera in my room and had given me an STD. It was a crazy ride I should have gotten out of much, much earlier, but it does make for a good story. And there are 1,000 more entertaining aspects to it I didn't have room for.
I was 21, recently became a police officer, and was also recently dumped. So my friend suggested Tinder. As a 21-year-old and new cop, I had the I'm invincible and I can take on anyone mentality. I matched with a very good-looking, out-of-my-league female. We chatted and eventually set up a date to meet. She said she had a great open field to look at stars and hang out, and then we could meet up at her house. So the night came, I was excited, and she seemed to be excited when I picked her up. She guided me to the field, and it looked nice. Open space, woods, deer, and other wildlife. In the field, I noticed really dim headlights in the distance. Then the van started driving towards us and pulled up in front of us, almost close enough to block me from going forward. I told her to stay in the car and I'll go say hi. I grabbed my flashlight I had in the car and walked up. In the front driver's side of the van, there was a decently sized man. I asked him what's going on and if he could back his car up a little bit. He was very polite, said he was the owner of the property, and said he didn't mean to scare us. He told me he's been having trouble with poachers on his property and just wanted to make sure we weren't going to be shooting at anything. I assured him we only came out to look at some stars and wildlife. He was perfectly okay with that, told me to have a nice date, and drove away. After that, the girl was texting nonstop. Around an hour later, I saw headlights coming towards us again, this time at a really fast pace. We hopped in the car and I moved it to a more defensive position. The same man came close enough to almost hit my car. She hopped out of the car at that point and ran towards the guy. I immediately knew I was fucked. I got out and gave them commands to back up and get on the ground. Neither of them complied. Obviously. He then proceeded to charge me and knock me to the ground. Luckily, I was able to get him on his back and get up. I saw my date grab a metal pipe from the van. She told me they had a gun and to give them my money and truck and I won't get hurt. Of course, with my I'm invincible mentality, I said no. She started to cry and saying they didn't want to hurt me. He then started to go back towards the car. At that point, I told them I was a cop, drew my concealed firearm, and to lay on the ground. After a moment of shock from all of us, they complied. I was able to call 911, tell them my name and badge number. I had two at gunpoint and needed backup immediately. I gave our dispatcher the best directions I could to this field. While on the phone, they both fled. Again. Stupid new cop young guy mentality. I chased them. I took off after the man, who ran into the woods around the field. I chased him for maybe 30 seconds and heard 3 loud pops and saw a muzzle flash. My I'm invincible mentality went right out the window. I ran like hell back towards my car and peeled the hell out of there. I went back to the area I picked her up in, called dispatch again, and had officers come to that location. Of course, the first officers to pull up was my sergeant and my field training officer. Of course, they were both completely understanding and didn't give me any shit about it at all. The most used words were dumbass and stupid fucking rookie. I hopped in their car and went towards the field. Luckily, the van was still there. I was told to shut my mouth and only come out if they start getting shot at. They cleared the area and started looking in the van. They found meth right on the center console and searched the car. What scared me the most was when my field training officer and sergeant came back to the patrol car, let me out and told me to come look in the back of the van. Both of them were pale, looked horrified. I went to the back of the van, where there were several knives, duct tape, lighter fluid, a decent amount of rifle ammunition, handcuffs, and what looked to be dried blood. In the front seat passenger side, we found an AR-15 style rifle and 2 more handguns. We called for immediate backup and detectives. When they investigated the blood, it turned out it wasn't blood. The plates had been stolen and the van was a reported stolen. I still get shit about the whole encounter, but luckily no one got hurt. I will never use online dating again, ever.